There's a list of women who vanished after being invited to elite parties in Dubai. Only one ever came back. This is her story. I still don't know what made me say yes that night. Maybe it was the exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones after chasing jobs that never call back, after scrolling through agencies that ghost you, after realizing that beauty alone doesn't open doors anymore. I was 25, living in a tiny apartment in Los Angeles, sharing rent with a friend who had already packed up her modeling dreams for a 9-to-5. I told myself I wouldn't be next. So when the email came, clean, professional, and unsettlingly personal, I read every word twice. It was from someone calling himself Alexander Hart, a supposed creative director for an elite European fashion retreat hosted in the Swiss Alps. The wording was deliberate, exclusive, invitation only, private clientele, and then, at the end, selected based on your aesthetic profile. It didn't sound like the typical scam. There were attachments, portfolios, photos of models I actually recognized from campaigns, and even what looked like NDAs signed by them. The offer, an all-expenses-paid trip to a private resort in Switzerland for a 10-day fashion immersion and photo shoot, with the promise of high-end brand introductions. I remember thinking, finally. After years of empty castings, it felt like the break that people disappear waiting for. And disappear, I didn't realize then how literal that word would become. I showed the email to my friend, Carly, who frowned. "It's too good to be true," she said, stirring her coffee. "No one flies you across the world just because you look good on Instagram." But she also knew me well enough not to argue. I'd already clicked reply before she even finished her sentence. Within 3 days, a first-class e-ticket arrived. The sender asked me not to post about the trip, to preserve exclusivity, he said. That was the first red flag, but I ignored it. I told myself this was how high-end circles operated. Privacy, mystery, allure, all part of the brand. The flight to Zurich was surreal. They had a car waiting for me, with a small metal sign that read Heart Collective. The driver didn't say a word, just smiled through the rearview mirror. I remember the drive up into the Alps, the roads curling through pine forests, fog slipping across the windshield like smoke. The higher we went, the more the world below disappeared. My phone signal vanished before sunset. When the car finally stopped, I saw it, the Chateau de Lys. It looked like something from a fairy tale, a sprawling estate of marble terraces and frost-bitten fountains, its windows glowing gold against the snow. There were other girls there too, stepping out of similar black cars. All of them looked perfect, too perfect, silent, poised, and strangely expressionless. Inside, everything smelled of white roses and candle wax. The walls were covered in mirrors, not decorative ones, but tall, almost clinical, like the kind you'd find in a dance studio. I remember catching my reflection dozens of times in the first 10 minutes, and every time, the lighting seemed to shift just enough to flatter me. Whoever designed this place knew exactly how to control perception. We were greeted by a woman named Alara, who introduced herself as the program director. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She handed each of us a small envelope containing our room keys, a schedule, and a single instruction: no phones after 10 p.m. She said it was to encourage focus and presence during the experience. That night, I unpacked in my room, a minimalist space with white sheets, heavy curtains, and a window overlooking a valley so dark it looked endless. On the desk was a small gift box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a necklace, thin gold chain with a single charm shaped like an eye. A note beneath it read, "Wear this during your stay. It marks you as one of us." The phrase sent a small chill through me. One of us? I didn't know who us was, but I wore it anyway. At dinner, we sat around a long table covered in white linen. There were 10 of us, 9 girls and 1 man sitting at the head, Alexander Hart. He was older than I expected, maybe mid-40s, sharp suit, immaculate posture. He spoke softly, every word deliberate. He talked about art, self-perception, and the elevation of beauty through discipline. His eyes moved from face to face like he was studying each of us for a reason we didn't yet understand. When the meal ended, he stood and raised his glass. "Welcome to the chateau," he said. "Over the next 10 days, you'll learn what it means to be truly seen." Everyone smiled politely, clinking glasses. But I noticed something. None of the other girls actually drank. They lifted the glasses, touched the rims to their lips, but not one sip. I didn't think much of it then. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself this was all just nerves. The wind outside howled through the shutters. Somewhere down the hall, I heard slow footsteps, measured, deliberate, stopping right outside my door. Then a soft knock. I froze. When I didn't answer, whoever it was just stood there. For a full minute, I could hear the faint creak of the floorboards shifting under their weight. Then, slowly, the footsteps moved away. That was my first night at the Chateau de Lys, and it was the last time I felt safe there. The next morning, I woke to the sound of choral music echoing faintly through the hallways. Not from speakers, it sounded live, distant, like it came from somewhere deep inside the chateau. The air felt colder than it should have been, heavy with the scent of incense. When I pulled back the curtains, the valley was blanketed in fog so thick it swallowed the mountains. I remember thinking how cut off this place felt. No signal, no roads visible, no way to tell which direction led home. Breakfast was served in silence. The staff moved like ghosts, never speaking, never meeting our eyes. Each of us was given a small card with our name and a time slot for our session. Mine was at 10:30 a.m., in something called the reflection room. When it was my turn, Alara led me down a marble hallway lined with portraits, men and women in elaborate clothing, painted in poses that looked more like documentation than art. Their eyes followed me. She opened a heavy wooden door and gestured for me to step inside. The room was empty except for a single mirror that stretched from floor to ceiling, and a chair placed precisely in front of it. The lighting was dim, golden, almost theatrical. "Sit," she said, her tone soft but commanding. "Look at yourself. Don't look away until you see what you really are." Then she closed the door. At first, I thought it was some avant-garde modeling exercise, meditation, maybe. But after 10 minutes of staring, my reflection started to feel wrong. Not distorted, not supernatural, just off. Like I was looking at someone who was copying me with a delay too small to notice, yet big enough to unsettle me. I wanted to leave, but there were no visible handles on the inside of the door. When Alara finally returned, I asked what the point of it was. She smiled faintly and said, "We study your perception before we perfect your presentation." The next few days blurred together, scheduled meals, private photo sessions, lectures about posture, control, erasing the self. Alexander appeared rarely, but when he did, everyone straightened up like a soldier seeing their general. His presence carried something magnetic, unnerving. He spoke about beauty not as art, but as obedience. He said real beauty was a form of surrender. On the third night, one of the girls, Natalia, a soft-spoken model from Poland, didn't show up for dinner. Alara told us she had fallen ill and was resting. But later, when I passed her room on the way to the bathroom, the door was open, the bed was made, empty. Her suitcase was gone. I knocked, whispered her name, but only silence answered back. When I asked another girl, Isla, about it the next morning, she looked terrified. "Don't ask questions," she whispered. "People who ask questions leave early." Then she avoided me for the rest of the day. That afternoon, during our so-called wellness session, we were told to wear long white gowns and gather in the ballroom. The windows were covered with black drapes. In the center of the room stood Alexander, dressed entirely in black, with a small group of assistants standing in a half-circle behind him. On the floor was a circle made of salt or chalk, I couldn't tell which, with symbols I didn't recognize. The air was freezing, despite the fire blazing in the hearth. He spoke about shedding vanity, about becoming vessels for truth. Then he told us to step inside the circle one by one. Every time a girl did, 2 assistants would place their hands on her shoulders and whisper something too low to hear. Then Alexander would tilt his head, as if listening for something inside her. When it was my turn, I hesitated. His eyes locked onto mine, calm, cold, expectant. As I stepped forward, the air around me felt heavier, like static pressing against my skin. One of the assistants leaned close to my ear and whispered, "You are not ready." Alexander's expression darkened slightly, then smoothed into a polite smile. "That's all for today," he said. The session ended abruptly. That night, I lay awake, listening. Sometime after midnight, I heard soft footsteps again, but not outside my door this time. Inside, the faint creak of the floorboard near the dresser. I sat up, heart pounding, and reached for my phone out of instinct, but it was gone. I tore the sheets off the bed, searched under the pillow, the drawer, nothing. The necklace around my neck felt suddenly heavier. I wanted to rip it off, but when I tried, the clasp wouldn't open. I stumbled into the hallway, shaking, and found Isla sitting by her door, crying silently. She looked up at me with wide, hollow eyes. "They watch us," she whispered, "even when we sleep." Before I could ask what she meant, Alara appeared at the end of the hall. Her expression was serene, almost kind. "It's late," she said. Back to bed, both of you." Her tone left no room for refusal. Ayla obeyed immediately, retreating into her room like a frightened child. As I turned back toward mine, I noticed something glinting faintly in the corner of the ceiling, a tiny red light, pulsing. I stepped closer. It was a camera. The next morning, Natalia's name was erased from the roster on the dining room board. Her seat was gone. No one mentioned her again. It was like she'd never existed. I started to plan my exit that day. I didn't care about contracts, or NDAs, or opportunities. I just wanted out. But when I went looking for my passport in my luggage, it wasn't there. The drawer where I'd kept it was empty. And that's when the real fear began, the kind that doesn't come from darkness or ghosts, but from the sudden, undeniable realization that you are completely trapped. By the 7th day, everything in the chateau felt wrong, the air, the food, even the light. I'd stopped sleeping, terrified of waking to someone standing over me. Every morning we were told to attend meditation exercises that felt more like conditioning. Long hours of silence in front of mirrors, lights glaring, Alara pacing behind us, whispering words about purity, control, a transformation. But the real horror wasn't in what we were told, it was in how the other girls began to change. Their expressions dulled. Their movements became slow, mechanical, synchronized, as if someone had drained their personalities out of them. When I tried talking to Ayla again, she just stared through me. "You'll understand soon," she murmured, "when you stop fighting it." That night, I didn't go to my room. I hid behind the curtains in one of the smaller studios near the east wing, listening. Around midnight, I heard footsteps, multiple, and the faint sound of wheels on the floor. I peered through the curtain gap. 2 staff members were pushing a stretcher covered with a white sheet. Underneath, something human-shaped. They moved silently toward the lower stairwell, the one that was always locked. As soon as they disappeared down it, I crept out and followed. The lock on the stairwell door wasn't even that complex, just an old padlock that someone had forgotten to replace. I broke it with the heel of a fire extinguisher. What I found beyond it wasn't another floor, it was a descent. A narrow stone staircase spiraling into darkness, lit only by weak ember bulbs that hummed faintly. The air grew colder, damp, metallic. It smelled like bleach and iron. At the bottom was a corridor lined with steel doors, each labeled with numbers. From behind one of them came a low, rhythmic sound, like breathing, or maybe whispering. I inched closer. There was a small window set into the door. When I looked through it, I saw Natalia, or what was left of her. She was sitting upright in a chair, her head shaved, eyes unfocused, wearing the same white gown as before. Electrodes clung to her temples, thin wires running up into the ceiling. Her lips were moving, forming words I couldn't hear. I banged on the glass, whispering her name. Her gaze flicked toward me, slow, disoriented, then her mouth stretched into a weak smile. "They made me perfect," she said, though I couldn't hear her voice, only read the shape of the words. Then the lights in the hallway flickered. I ran. I didn't stop to look back. The next door I tried led to what looked like a laboratory, rows of cameras, monitors, and data screens filled with biometric readings, all displaying the faces of the girls upstairs. My own photo was among them, next to lines of code and timestamps labeled Phase 3, Compliance. That's when I understood, this wasn't a retreat. It was a human behavior experiment. Suddenly, a voice echoed behind me. "Curiosity is a beautiful flaw," Alexander said. He was standing in the doorway, calm as ever, a faint smile on his face. "You weren't supposed to see this yet." I backed away, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. "Where are the others?" I demanded. He sighed softly, like a teacher disappointed in his student. "You think beauty is a gift," he said, "but it's a formula, and we're refining it." He took a step closer, reaching into his pocket. I bolted. I don't even remember which hallway I took. Everything became a blur of white walls and red alarms as I ran through the chateau. I could hear voices behind me, calm but determined, echoing through the stairwell. "Don't let her leave," someone said. I pushed through a service door and found myself outside in the snow. The cold hit me like a slap. I ran barefoot across the courtyard, the wind slicing through the thin gown. Somewhere behind me, the heavy oak doors opened, flashlights cut through the fog. I darted behind the fountain, heart hammering, then down the side path I'd noticed on my first night, a trail leading toward the tree line. My feet burned against the frozen ground, but I didn't stop until the chateau was a faint silhouette behind the mist. I don't remember how long I ran. Hours, maybe? When the sun rose, I found a small mountain road and collapsed beside it. A delivery truck passed around noon. The driver found me curled up on the shoulder, shivering and incoherent. The police questioned me for hours, then days, but by the time they went to investigate, the estate was gone. Completely. Not abandoned, gone. The land records showed no such property, no such owner, no trace of Alexander Hart or his so-called foundation. Even the coordinates I'd pinned from my flight logs led to empty forest. They said I must have wandered off from a legitimate retreat, hallucinated the rest from stress and hypothermia. But I know what I saw. I know what they were doing down there. And sometimes, when I catch my reflection, I still see it, that slight delay, that faint, wrong smile that doesn't belong to me. Last month, I got another email. No subject line, no body, just a single attachment. A photo of me, asleep in my apartment, wearing the same gold eye necklace I swore I threw away in Switzerland. That's when I realized I never really escaped. Some places don't want to make you famous. They want to make you disappear. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more true horror stories that are just a little too real.